Hello, and welcome to this month's Urban and Community IPM webinar on Back to School Pests. We are happy to have presenting today Karey Windbiel-Rojas. Karey is the Associate Director for Urban and Community IPM with UC IPM and an Urban IPM Advisor for Yolo, Solano, and Sacramento counties. As Associate Director, Karey provides leadership and communicates communication and educational efforts to address urban issues around homes, structures, landscapes, gardens, schools, and public areas. We're grateful to have you join us today, Karey. You may now share your slides and begin.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to talk to you about back to school pests. I have 3 children myself who are going back to school next week, and I know a lot of schools have already started or are also about to start next week. So this is a great time to think about pests and talk about pests and know a little bit about the pests that we may encounter, our students may encounter, and how to keep them from coming home with them and also establishing in our home and other important things that we want to consider while the kids are at school. So one of the reasons we are covering pests at school is because we send our children to school, and this could also mean university as well. But we send our children to school, and they do spend a majority of their time there. Homeschooling may be different, of course, but those who go to, leave the house, go to school is what we're talking about. So children are particularly vulnerable to pest and chemical exposure of pesticides because their bodies are still developing, and especially smaller kids, including those that go to daycare or preschool, they are on floors a bit more. They may nap on the floor. They may be crawling. So there's a lot of vulnerabilities in young children who may be exposed to both pests and pesticides. And schools face pest problems all the time because there are people coming and going. There's food, there's hiding places. A lot of this we're going to talk about today. And so pests around school sites are particularly problematic. And I'm going to mostly, I think, cover sort of K through 12 situations today, but not to forget that students who go off to college can also bring home pests or encounter pests through their living situations. So the problem with pests, and this is generally for the pests that we'll be covering today and some that we aren't covering, is that many of the pests that we will talk about today can carry and transmit diseases, which can pose health threats to both students, staff at school, and also us at home. So rodents, for instance, certain rodents can carry hantavirus, salmonella, other issues. Pests can carry diseases, and they can contaminate food in food preparation areas, cafeterias, and this can lead to foodborne illnesses. And then there are certain pests like cockroaches, dust mites, and rodents that can trigger or cause allergies and also asthma symptoms. And when children are developing and they're, very young, if they develop asthma as a young child, they can have it for their whole lives. And so we want to try and limit their exposure to pests as much as possible, but especially at school sites where you're less in control of the situation. And then having pests can be really distracting if someone is itching. We are going to talk about head lice today. So if someone is scratching or itching or has bites or is uncomfortable or there's droppings or, all kinds of potential issues, that can really be distracting and distressing. And so loss of learning and a loss of feeling good about yourself. If you know that you've got bed bugs and people find out, they can make fun of the child. And so all of that is really not something we want to happen at school. And then there are pests that can cause property damage to the school and to the building, leading to costly repairs and damage. And that can be passed on to the taxpayers and also just cause them to have to do more work than some of the already necessary work on the school site. And then if pests come home with your child, then that can lead to damage in your own home if an infestation gets out of hand. It's a lot of issues. Today, we're going to cover just a few pests because we only have a short amount of time, and there's a lot that can be said about a lot of different pests. But some of the main ones that we are concerned with at school sites are head lice, bed bugs, and I have rats, but I meant commensal rodents, which I will talk about, rats and mice, cockroaches, and then we'll talk a bit about what to do, what not to do, and then where you can find more resources to supplement and give you more information than the limited amount we'll cover today. All right, first going to head lice. And just to let you know, there will be pictures of head lice and cockroaches and rats and bed bugs coming up, so be prepared. So what's important to know about head lice and really any pest is anyone can be exposed. Anyone can get head lice. You just have to be exposed to something that is carrying the lice. Children are more prone to lice infestations because they play more closely with one another and they're in these school situations. They may lay down, they may share hats, they may, share things. So we do find that kids get them more frequently than adults do. And head lice are usually spread through direct head-to-head contact, and less likely from hats and combs unless someone with lice is wearing them and then they hand them over sort of quickly. But lice don't transmit any infectious diseases, but obviously with itching and discomfort and anxiety and then that embarrassment, they can really cause some other problems. So head lice cannot hop, fly, or jump. They're not like fleas in that regard. They do crawl. And good news, they can only survive off a human head for 1 or 2 days. And they don't live on the family pet. They really are associated with humans and human heads. There are different kinds of lice that might be on the body or other areas, but I'm particularly talking about head lice today. And so their eggs, which are also called nits, are usually no more than a 1/4 inch from the scalp. If they are, then they are probably dead or they've already hatched. And I have a picture in the next slide about some nice fresh head lice eggs that are attached to the hair follicle. So the eggs are glued by the female to the hair, and this is going to be near the scalp since the lice themselves are going to feed on the scalp. So when they are still developing, the eggs are dark in color, and then once the louse has hatched out, the eggs are going to be white or kind of clear. The adult head lice, and here is a blown up picture of one, is about the size of a sesame seed, and they do crawl pretty rapidly. You can see them with the naked eye, but they're still pretty small. And they have these pinchers where they hold on to the hair shaft, but then they do feed on the scalp and feed on blood. So their infestations with that feeding and with the bites, they can cause intense scratching on the person's head, back of the neck, especially back of the head, excuse me. But some people can have lice and not feel itchy, not have that sensation. So looking for lice is something you have to actually, look for and move the hair back. You can't just wait for someone to have a scratchy head and know that that's the first and only sign. Although we probably all have scratchy heads right now as I talk about lice. So how to manage head lice. And this is just a really general slide. I'm going to show you throughout the presentation more resources. But really what we recommend is removing the eggs or the nits by combing hair. And you can find these specially designed combs to get those nits out more successfully than a regular comb. And you do want to remove lice and eggs from any infested areas, avoiding head-to-head contact with the infested person. You might consider treating infested scalps with a head louse insecticidal product, and there are many different products out there. And then checking the head of the infested person and removing eggs daily until the infestation is gone. There's also laundering of materials and other recommended actions, which I will show you where to find those. So things can be done. I'm sure most folks that are on this call have had some sort of experience with head lice in your life, and it is manageable. It's, not something you want. So how can we keep the head lice from coming home with our kids? That sometimes is not possible, but we can certainly manage them when they do come home. The next pest I want to talk about is bed bugs. And bed bugs are more and more common these days than they used to be. There's some resurgence of bed bugs across the United States and actually across the globe. So bed bugs are small insects. They are about 1/5 of an inch. You can see them with the naked eye. A lot of times people think that they are microscopic, but you can actually see them. When they are in their small stages, they are harder to see, but they still can be seen with the naked eye. They are flattened and oval, and the adult stage especially is sort of a rusty red color. They will have different coloring if they have if their tummies are full with blood. The bed bugs, they must have a blood meal in order to develop from one stage to another. And that is all they eat is blood. And they feed on us, on humans. And so if they don't get a blood meal, they will not survive for very long. They must have a blood meal before developing from their younger stages to the older stages. And you can see here a variety of the different life stages. So they must have a blood meal in order to move on, or else they will die. Adults may feed every 5 to 7 days, but they can survive many months without feeding. The immature stages survive for less less duration if they have not fed, but they can still survive for maybe a few days to a few weeks, depending on their life stage. And as adults, they can survive for many months without food. And so what makes bed bugs a problem at school sites is that they are really great hitchhikers. They can be picked up in the classroom as well as sleeping areas such as dorm rooms or apartments or your friend's house. But they can be picked up in childcare centers where kids may nap. But even where you might not think that people are sleeping, because bed bugs are not only in beds, they can be brought to school on an infested item, and then they can hitchhike home on other items. So people can generally bring bed bugs into their homes on luggage that they go from hotel or dorm or what have you, but also on clothes, bedding, furniture, and objects like backpacks. And this is a book, and here is a shoe. So here is a bed bug on what I presume is a little girl's shoe. These are bed bugs that it's a pretty bad infestation for them to be on a book. But if you get books that are infested and you can bring them home, you wouldn't think they'd be on books. And then an infestation can get out of hand, especially if the books are in our bedrooms where we sleep or where we spend a lot of time. And then here you can see a bed bug right next to the Velcro of this backpack. Bed bugs generally do like really small space to sort of hide in, which makes it harder to find them, but you certainly can upon inspection. Here's another picture. Some of these pictures are from our colleagues at the University of Arizona, and they had some great pictures that I wanted to use to show you. This is a stuffed animal toy, and right here in the middle is a bed bug that's hiding right under that layer of pink. So I don't have the full picture of what the stuffed animal looked like, but this is the close-up of something. And that bed bug's the same size as the stuffed animal, the brown part underneath. So easy to miss, but certainly you can find them. So generally about head lice and bed bugs, You do want to check belongings for these pests when your child gets home or when your student gets home from college for the summer or when they're moving into their house. Check for things. You're not going to find head lice around without the presence of an infested person, but bed bugs could certainly be around. So checking for bedding often, check your child's bed at home. You know, if you work at a childcare center, you might check the bedding that you provide to the kids or other places. And for head lice, you want to check the student's hair periodically, especially if they're not itching at all. It's a good idea to check. If they have darker hair, you might spot something. If they have lighter hair, it's harder, but you certainly should do some checks, especially as all the kids are coming back to school after summer vacation and sleepovers or other kinds of summer camps. A good time to think about pests and check for them. And if head lice or bed bugs are found on your student, they don't need to stay home from school. Just, you know, you could inform the school that you're aware and to keep it managed and do what you can to manage the infestation. But the student does not need to stay home from school. So there is more information on the UCIPM website. Here are two screenshots of our pest notes publications, which we have one for every pest that I'm talking about today. At the end of the presentation, I will show you more resources in addition to UCIPMs, but we have a whole fact sheet on bed bugs and fact sheet on head lice that has a lot more information about identification, life cycle, situations, and then of course, management or control. So I'll come back to resources and what to do in a little bit. All right, on to rodents. Rodents such as rats and mice are referred to as commensal rodents. They are rodents that like to live around our homes, around people and humans, and they have adapted to do really well in the situations that we do well in. So they are closely associated with our homes and our situations like school sites where they might find food, water, and shelter, which is an element that many pests do need. So commensal rodent droppings and their urine and saliva can be spread in the air or eating food that is contaminated with rodent waste. And rodents also can trigger asthma and allergies in susceptible individuals, especially young children. But if someone has asthma, it can trigger an asthma incident, or for young children can be the cause of developing asthma. Rodents also carry what's called ectoparasites, things like ticks and mites and fleas that can themselves carry diseases and spread diseases, or they can cause bites and make folks uncomfortable, make kids uncomfortable. So we certainly don't want these in our school sites, and they are fairly common around our schools, and a pest that you know, is sort of constantly having to control. One of the best ways to prevent a rodent infestation in the school is to remove those sources of food, water, and shelter. So with head lice and bed bugs, their source of food is the child, is the human, whereas they don't really drink water. They don't drink water, but they do need shelter to sort of hide in. The next pest that I'm talking about, the commensal rodents and the cockroaches, they are eating other food. And around school sites, we have snacks and lunches and hiding places and also some moisture. And those kinds of conditions are really conducive to these other pests. So I'll be talking a little bit differently about how to manage and consider those pests. Rodents are attracted to the food that we might have for them, the smell of food that may be stored in our desks or school cabinets. A lot of times, especially for childcare centers or for younger age students, there are cupboards with snacks, or the teacher has some snacks, or there's a day that snacks are being extra provided, or there's an activity. And so having food in cabinets, or in the situation of desks, food in lockers for older ages that have lockers, and lunch bags that are either left there or all piled together is a great resource for rodents to find available food. They also, if there's a food preparation area, the cafeteria, or other kinds of food prep areas, they can definitely have a food source in those areas as well. And then associated with rodents, as I mentioned, are some of those ectoparasites, biting mites, and even flies that can become a problem when rodents are present in schools. Flies can be attracted to their feces or any dead rodents that might be in ceilings or other places. So we have, of our commensal rodents of concern, I'm mostly talking about those that are going to be in the classroom or in the dorm room or in the building. So we have two that we really are concerned about. We have the rats and house mouse. So for rats in California, we mainly have two kinds of rats. The Norway rat, which builds their burrows around the ground, around the building foundation, beneath rubbish or wood piles, or around trash piles, compost, and dumpsters. And indoors, they tend to remain more towards the ground level, basements, ground floor. Then we have roof rats. And if you think about roof rats, right, they're going to be more on the roof, near the roof. Not that Norway rats can't get up there, because they're both good climbers. But roof rats are really great climbers. There is a way to distinguish roof rats and Norway rats from each other, and I'll show you our resource. But they tend to live and nest above ground in trees, shrubs, and dense vegetation, but they can also get indoors in the attics and in the walls and false ceilings and into cabinets. So both these rats can be a problem around our school sites, carrying diseases and getting into our foodstuffs. So controlling rodents at school sites, mostly this is going to be the job of the school staff, the plant manager, the janitor, the IPM coordinator, whoever is assigned for the pest management. And students and teachers have a role in pest prevention for those pests, especially who are attracted to food items and clutter, so they can do their part to limit the clutter and keep food items out or stored well, cleaning up spills. Oops, excuse me. But mostly the management will need to be done by whatever school staff or district staff that is assigned to it. And I'm showing a really great graphic by the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. They have a program for IPM, or integrated pest management, around schools and childcare sites. And so they provide training and resources for those who do manage pests on school sites, which also could include structural pest control businesses and companies that are contracted to do the pest management on school sites. So this is a graphic that can be provided by them along with their training to make sure that they know what to do. But certainly the teachers and the students have a role to play as well to keep the attractive food out. So this is another one of DPR, Department of Pesticide Regulations graphics. So this is talking about trapping, which obviously the students and the teachers are not going to do. But in any kind of pest management, there needs to be identification of the pest to make sure we're talking about, is it a roof rat? Is it a Norway rat? Or is it a house mouse? Because how they're managed, what their behavior is going to be different, and it's going to be important for knowing how precisely and effectively your management strategies are going to be. So again, it's not going to be the child or you who as the adult or the parent who's going to do anything, but everybody plays a role in making sure that the pest situation is taken care of. All right, moving on to cockroaches. So cockroaches are also, like commensal rodents, a public health concern because infestations of cockroaches can be a source of indoor allergens. They also contribute to risk factors for asthma, either developing in young children or triggering asthma and allergies if they already have them. And then some cockroaches transmit diseases and bacteria as well. Since they are decomposers, they crawl over all kinds of decaying matter and surfaces, and they can carry some decaying matter or feces onto foodstuffs that may be then consumed. And so we definitely want to keep cockroaches out of schools, but cockroaches can hitchhike and come home on your kids' school items. And so both those things are concerned. Generally, speaking of the biology of cockroaches, they are nocturnal, so they are not always seen during the day. They do like to hide. They will quickly scatter when they're disturbed, and they do like to hide in dark, warm areas. And they generally congregate together and hide in corners and other kinds of secluded areas. So you may not always see them, but they come out at night and they can look around for food and contaminate food, and we don't know it. Their life cycle is different from, say, bed bugs or head lice, in that their eggs, the cockroach eggs, are laid by the female into cases that I always think looks like little clutch purses. But within these cases can be, you know, 30 to 60 or so different eggs. And so you can see all these little stripes on this light colored egg. Each one of those is an individual cockroach that's developing. So they start as eggs inside this egg case. And then when the egg hatches, then the developing immature cockroaches come out, and then they start to feed. So the German and field cockroaches, the female carries her egg until it hatches. So until the case breaks open, then the female will let go of that egg. But other cockroach species, mostly the outdoor species, will deposit the egg in suitable locations and usually moist, dark areas. And then the egg cases are by themselves, and they hatch when they're developmentally ready. There are different cockroaches to be concerned about indoors. There are several species that are outdoor cockroaches that develop and thrive outdoors. And those can be problems at school sites, but especially problematic for indoor, inside the classroom. And then if they come home with a student inside our homes, that is the German cockroach. And this is the most common indoor species that we find in California. We find them really proliferating in multi-unit housing, where you've got multiple apartments or units that touch each other because they can get through openings under doors and electric conduits and plumbing. So this is a problematic species indoors because it does thrive indoors with us in warm and humid areas. That's around 70, 75, which is kind of what our indoor environment comfort zone might be. Oops. And they are found close to food, water, and those dark hiding spots. So especially kitchens, food prep areas, and bathrooms. So at school sites, as well as at our homes, there may be kitchen and food prep areas and bathrooms where they can find moisture and hiding places in that warm area, as well as food. And so they are definitely a food contamination and health risk because they're going to be indoors with us more frequently than the other types of outdoor dwelling cockroaches. And I'm not going to talk about the outdoor cockroaches today, since we're really talking about schools and our association with these pests, but there are many control measures for those outdoor cockroaches that we could talk about. So for control of cockroaches at school, for students and teachers, again, they want to Keep the food in tightly sealed containers, limit the access for food by cockroaches or ants or rodents, and keeping trash in containers with tightly fitted lids. So the cockroaches or rodents that are possibly going to come out at night won't have access to them. And in addition, removing other sources of hiding places, like piles of paper or cardboard boxes or anything that's going to be a hiding spot for both cockroaches and rodents. School staff will have other measures that they need to take. And again, this is going to be in conjunction with what the students and the teachers can do. The school staff and IPM coordinator would be able to seal any cracks which are allowing cockroaches to come from the outdoors. The outdoor species might find themselves inside, but cockroaches can move from classroom to classroom. So sealing any kind of cracks, installing door sweeps and weather stripping around doors and windows so that the cockroaches aren't able to move as well. Removing any of the hiding places that they can fix in a way, such as cupboards or even vegetation outdoors that they might find an area to hide. And then fixing that moisture, the plumbing or irrigation leaks that could cause a moist and warm environment that the cockroaches like. And then at home, so when your student comes home, whether it's from class during the day or from camp or from dormitories, coming home to do their laundry, let's say, you want to inspect items that come home. So backpacks, lunch bags, sweaters that were left on the school playground, anything that is going to come home with the child, their bag of clothes from college, you want to check. And then inside your own home too, making the conditions not favorable to the pests. So limiting their access to food, water, and shelter, which is a whole nother discussion about IPM that you can do in the home for other kinds of pests, including cockroaches and rats, but also say pantry pests or ants, which we aren't really covering today. So there are other pests around school sites that we could cover, and I just wanted to point out a few of these pests. And we do have resources on these, but I'm not covering them today. There are different kinds of flies that may be associated with schools. This is a drain fly or a moth fly that can be found in bathrooms and in kitchens where there's a buildup of gunk in the pipes. This is a fruit fly, which can be found around ripe or rotting fruit, and that can be sometimes a problem in the kitchens or also over a weekend if someone left their fruit somewhere. Ants can definitely be a problem in school sites, that they are attracted to the food and leftovers and crumbs that the students can leave out. I mean, ants are a problem kind of anywhere. If they've found what they want, they're gonna get there. And then mosquitoes can be a problem at school sites, but just about anywhere too. So there's a whole bunch of resources on mosquito control and limiting any kind of breeding sites. And spiders. There can be outdoor spiders and there can be indoor spiders, especially as we all get back to school, as the students return to school. Maybe there hasn't been a whole lot of activity at the school for the last couple of months, and spiders tend to move into areas that are less disturbed. So hopefully the school staff have done some cleaning before the kids go back, but there may be at first more spiders around certain areas because the kids have not been there. So yeah, lots of other potential pests to think about as well. So now let's talk about what to do, what not to do, and resources. So for the younger kids, keeping their backpacks clean and properly stored, both in the class and outside the class at home. So, excuse me. So if you're like my kids' classes, they take their lunches and they all throw them into a bin, and that's where they go until lunchtime. Every class management is different, so sometimes all the backpacks go into these bins. Some teachers, some schools have more space or more resources where every child can hang up their own backpack on a peg. But a lot of times the backpack is on the child, especially in the older grades, or in their locker on the floor. So anytime the backpacks are touching or on the floor, they can pick up a pest if it's there. So things that we can do can include cleaning up crumbs from lunch, washing those lunch bags, any kind of built up clutter. If your kids are like mine, there is always papers and crumbs and clutter at the bottom of their backpack. So frequently checking them and emptying them, and maybe washing the backpack according to the label and the manufacturer's directions. But checking them also for hitchhiking insects like the bed bugs, which can easily hitchhike, as I showed you, but also cockroaches could hitchhike as well, and so could ants. So just check things and see what you find, and maybe launder them. And at home, try to store the backpacks in a room other than the bedroom. If you suspect that there might be bed bug issues, or if you know that there's been a bed bug issue, store the backpacks not right next to the kids' bed, where they can then take up residence, because that's where your child is sleeping. And anything coming home from your child's dormitory from college or university, you want to check that as well. And so keeping these items clean, regularly cleaning out and washing them and inspecting them, gym bags too, will help. Storing any food properly that goes to school with the child will help the situation in the classroom. So keeping them sealed and unavailable, and trying to remind your child to bring that home, because kids forget and they leave stuff at school all the time. And if they have a locker, not to leave food or drinks in the locker or inside their desk overnight. Just bring everything home or consume it, and recycle or throw it away at school. And then avoiding clutter. So in the desks, in the lockers, in the dorm rooms, in the backpack, avoiding clutter, which is going to be great for hiding places. And, if you can't wash the items, maybe regularly vacuum them, shake them out, and then also vacuum and do all that regular housekeeping around the home and in the bedroom. And so laundering, if you anything that comes home from school, if you suspect there's going to be a pest problem, you want to wash any bedding that comes home from college or from the childcare. You want to make sure to wash that. And any kind of clothing, if they left their sweater in the classroom and it's been on the floor, just washing things and making sure that they're not going to be harboring any bed bugs or head lice or cockroaches or anything. So you can, if you can't wash it right away, drying something in the hottest temperature will kill life stages of bed bugs and head lice. But if you can wash and dry, that's at the hottest temperature, that will the fabric will allow, that will kill any pests that might be there. And so what not to do if a pest comes home with your child or yourself or your college student. Don't panic. Everybody gets pests. We are in this IPM business at UC IPM. We talk about pests all the time to everybody. Everybody gets pests. And we've mostly all had some, like I said, introduction to head lice at some point in our life. It happens. So not to panic, and think about, okay, what can we do? What are the resources that I'm going to show you? You do not want to spray. If your child has head lice, do not spray them. Some people freak out and they don't think about what they might be doing with exposure to pesticides. You do not want to spray any person or any of their clothing with any kind of insecticide. So don't spray the backpacks, the shoes, the clothing, anything, and especially not the person or their head. So you want to just be calm and think about what needs to be done. Don't put any pesticides in your kid's backpack. This is a picture from our colleagues at the University of Arizona. This is one of those no pest strips, I think they're called. It contains a pesticide that has a really long name, but it starts with dichlorobos. It's usually abbreviated as DDVP, and these emit pesticide vapors, and they're really dangerous. They actually are on the highly hazardous pesticide list because we should not be breathing them in. They are meant for areas that are not going to be occupied for 3 months or longer. So they're sold all over, but you do not want to hang any in your child's room or in the closet if that child is occupying it. And you definitely don't want to put it in their backpack. So no pesticides. All right. There's plenty of other things that can be done. And as I said, it's not necessary to keep kids home from school if they have, had bed bug bites or came home with bed bugs or have had lice. So let's talk now about disinfectants and sanitizers. Since I was talking about pesticides, disinfectants and sanitizers are considered pesticides as well, which many people don't really think about if they have a disinfectant wipe, that it's actually a pesticide. So first off, children should never handle disinfectant wipes. They are a pesticide, it's exposing them to a pesticide. And the school staff and teachers take an annual training, and a lot of what is talked about is those disinfectant wipes. They tend to wipe the desk clean. Children should not be doing that. And so if you are unsure if your disinfectant or sanitizer is a pesticide, you want to read the label closely and see, well, is this for hand wipe or is this a surface wipe? And I'll show you a picture here shortly. But you as the adult should also check the label to see what personal protective equipment says about it, and also things like how long should it remain on the surface. And that's really important for disinfecting a surface. And we do have a good article here that we will send you a link to tomorrow with a blog article about using disinfectants. But here's a graphic from the National Pesticide Information Center that talks about the proper use of disinfecting wipes. So I just want to pull out two important pieces of this that describes what they are. They are antimicrobials that are intended to kill microbes, kill bacteria, kill germs. And they are maybe disposable wipes, but they're for hard surfaces. They are not for hands. All right, so they're not intended for use on skin, but they sometimes look really similar to those that are intended for use on skin. So just read the label and see if it says kills germs and viruses and bacteria. And if you're unsure, you can give NPIC a call. And so at schools and daycare centers, only adults should use them, not the children. You want to keep them out of reach of children, leaving the wipes in the original container, reading it to make sure you know how long it should be there. And of course, as parents, you can say, does your teacher allow you to use those wipes? And if they do, you want to talk to the teacher and let them know, because they should know that children are not supposed to be using those as disinfectant wipes. We don't have time today to get into all the disinfectant wipes, but we have a great recorded webinar that you can access on the UCIPM YouTube channel that was part of our monthly webinar series that you're on today. And this is using disinfectants and wipes safely, so you can go watch that. It's about 45 minutes long. And now I want to show you a few of the resources that I've mentioned already, and then we'll have some time for questions. So we have our UCIPM resources as pest notes. Pest World has some great information. There is a program, Stop School Pests, from the University of Arizona that was a national program, and they have great resources on their website. I'm going to show you some resources from the Department of Pesticide Regulation School IPM and childcare program, and the National Pesticide Information Center, which was that disinfectant wipes I just showed. So just like the bed bugs and the head lice, we have information on our website where you can read more about identification and management of all these different pests in and around schools, in addition to spiders and flies and ants and the other things that I didn't talk about. So these are all freely available on the UCIPM website. And again, we'll send you some links tomorrow. And then just to let you know about the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, they do training and have materials for school district staff and service providers at school sites. And I showed you this classroom pest prevention graphic. They make these great graphics that help the staff and service providers know what to do as far as following integrated pest management at school sites. And all of this is part of the Healthy Schools Act requirements that is part of the Department of Pesticide Regulations charge is to inform people about what the Healthy Schools Act is and how they can be in compliance for the K through 12 schools. So you can check out their website to read more about what they do and how they provide that information. The United States Environmental Protection Agency also has some great resources and a focus on school IPM that they have been working on for several years. And you can read more about them. They have a ton of resources. One of the great resources that I found was this pest control in the school environment, which is really for practitioners of pest management around schools. And so it gives them great information about how to do things and how to establish a IPM program and how to keep pests at bay at schools. So I now think we have time for questions, and thank you very much. And I want to thank also my helpers from the University of Arizona who provided me a number of the images and some of the slides. So thank you.
Thank you, Karey, for the great information.